Well, welcome along, everybody. Heck of a lot to go at this morning, isn't there? Now, only a day after the Prime Minister called on organisers not to let extremists hijack protests, thousands have taken part yet again in pro-Palestinian protests across the country, with 12 arrests after failing to follow a dispersal order.
Yes, well, this comes today as further warnings emerge over extremism in the UK. The Daily Mail is reporting that Britain's terror threat is at its highest level since 9/11.
Well, in the same paper, former Immigration Minister Roger Gewolb has been extremely vocal about what he thinks is going on. He's exposed the cosy relationship between the left and extremism.
Yes. Well, we're joined now by the former advisor to the Bank of England, Dr. Roger Gewolb, and the political commentator, Nathaniel Ogoniyi. Good morning to you both. Well, Roger, here you are in the studio. Now, we want to talk to you also about the war on woke in Whitehall. This is what Jeremy Hunt is proposing. But Roger, first, your thoughts on the Prime Minister, what he said about extremism. We've got Robert Jenrick in the paper this morning talking about how there's a cosy relationship between the far left and also Islamist extremists.
Yes, I think that extremism is permeating into our culture to an unjustified and a very large extent in theater, in all sorts of different areas where a war in a country far away shouldn't really have that level of influence.
Nathaniel, I'll bring you in on this now. Some of the big headlines this morning, we've got the biggest terror threat that we've faced since 9/11. We had the Prime Minister on the steps outside Downing Street, didn't we? We've had continued protests, 12 arrests this time on Saturday. How worried do you think we should all be about this?
So I think it's important to remain have a sense of context.
I'm just going to... Nathaniel, very sorry about this. Slight issue with your microphone there. We will come back to you. Apologies. I'll just sit with you on this then, Roger, really. I mean, we saw Suella Braverman sacked for coming out and saying relatively similar stuff when it comes to extremism, etc. Now, down the line, a couple of months down the line, we've got the Prime Minister saying the same things. Do you think he should probably apologise to Suella Braverman, have her back maybe, or not?
The first, certainly, I think he should at least acknowledge that she's made a point which now the zeitgeist, if you will, the collective sort of spirit and consciousness has picked up. I was a little disappointed with his speech. Like everything else he says, it sounds good, but there's really... like Keir Starmer as well, it's just words. There's nothing concrete to get your fingers around or your teeth into, is there? Okay, there have been some arrests this morning of people who didn't obey the police. That's kind of new. Yeah, I mean, look, I think that people who want to protest about Palestine should be free to do it, but they've made their point. And it's just when it spills over into the hate, the anti-Semitism and the I don't use the word Islamophobia. It's a crazy word. It means fear of Muslims. It's not fear of Muslims. It's hate for Muslims. It's anti-Islamicism. So the anti-Semitism and the anti-Islamicism that comes off the back of some of these protests, that's got to be stopped. It's illegal. But what's he going to do about it? All these fine words, but, there's really...
One thing that they say they're going to do, which I imagine a lot of us would have thought was already being done, is that they're going to draw up a list of hate preachers from across the world and make it automatic that they're not allowed to come into Britain. Well, you would have thought our Home Office were already doing such things. We saw in France how quick they were to deport an imam who was spouting hatred against France, yet we can't seem to do the same here. Are we always a bit of a step or 10 steps behind?
Well, this is how politicians, Emily, and especially this government operate. They're going to reinvent the wheel. The British intelligence services already have 50,000 names of people who are here. You don't need to look for people coming across the border force. I mean, what they need to do is get control of the situation here. But it's just empty words. It depresses me.
Yeah, no, indeed. And there's a big spread in the Daily Mail today. We're going to be talking about that a little bit later on with our newsmakers. They've got a picture of that infamous blown-up bus, the 7-7 bus, and then Robert Jenrick, the former Immigration Minister. They're really emphasising the terrorist and extremist threat. But there is, of course, More than just one story in town today, Roger. Let's talk about Jeremy Hunt. Now, there's two stories related to Hunt today. He's going to war on immoral Whitehall waste, and he's also flirting with the idea of tax cuts again, isn't he?
I don't think personally Jeremy Hunt could go to war on a fly. Talk about empty words. He creeps me out. I mean, he
creeps you out.
Every time I see him, I think Bates Motel, you know. He just says all this nonsense. I mean, the latest thing is that we're going to spend hundreds of millions right away to eliminate policemen having to show up at traffic accidents and that sort of thing, because we're going to send drones. I mean, can you imagine it? Sir, breathe into this tube here. Wait a minute. Hit and run. Where did they go? I don't know. That's my drone. Get another drone. You know, it's insane.
Well, perhaps that's the way forward.
No, because what he hasn't told you is what he's going to cut. See, everything, this is my personal view with Mr. Hunt, is he tells you how great things are while he takes something away from you.
So do you think
Taxes,
he's being a bit disingenuous where he says woke spending on Whitehall departments?
Yeah, what's he going to do?
Is that actually going to pay for anything?
Exactly. What is he actually going to do? All of his things, they sound great, but when you look behind them, for example, the 55 billion pound black hole that scared the bejesus out of us so that we couldn't so that he could introduce 25 billion of new taxes, which he did by stealth. And then more than half of it, 30 billion, disappeared 2 days later, never to be heard of again. And there wasn't a black hole a week before.
The concern for me with Jeremy Hunt, well, there's quite a lot, actually, but one of the big things, I think he listens to people like this, which we've got on the front of The Observer. We've had it a lot on front of The Independent. We've had it a lot on the front of The Guardian. Tax cuts will backfire. People keep pumping him full of this stuff. And people saying as well, how dare you cut taxes, quotes, for the rich, when we've got people going to food banks. And he just always seems to cave into that.
Why doesn't he raise the tax threshold from £12,570 to 20 grand so that low earners aren't suffocated by the amount of tax and interest rate rises and everything else that's been put on them? It's insane. The things that he does are illusory. It's all smoke and mirrors. So
that's a Reform Party policy, that, raising it to £20,000, the threshold there.
Absolutely. You know, and George Galloway winning has split Labour, and frankly, it all favors Rishi and Hunt carrying on. And it's scary because their monetary policy and their fiscal policy is the worst since Robin Hood.
Gosh, well, there we go.